City of Stevens Point Public Works Committee meeting, recorded May 13, 2024.
Let's see, 6:13, I will call the Board of Public Works meeting to order. Could we get a roll call, Trish?
Sure. Mayor Wiesa.
Here.
Chris Tiffany.
Chris Tiffany messaged me. He is scheduled to be here at 6:17.
Okay.
He's on his way, running behind.
Kneebone.
Here.
Morrow.
Here.
Kimmer.
Here.
Shuda.
Here.
And Boozy.
Here.
And we have a quorum, so we'll continue. Item number 1 is the director's report. That was included in your packet. No items of note to discuss today, but if anyone has questions from audience watching online or any of the alders, you can contact the director at his office. I would be looking for a motion to accept that report and place it on file.
So move.
Moved by Shuda,
Second.
seconded by Morrow. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 2 is a discussion on the ideas for possible actions to be taken on West River Drive. This item stems from a discussion or a comment last month in regards to the fatality that happened recently on West River Drive. Without getting into details of the case, because that's working its way through court, there was some significant concerns from those residents in the area as well as citizens at large. We asked the director to take a few minutes tonight and talk about things that have already been done and things that could potentially be done that are being evaluated, and the police chief will chime in. He's still back there? Where'd he go?
He stepped up.
He did. All right, the police chief can also talk about some of the enforcement that's been going on and will be going on. So, Director, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you. So really where we're at now, after taking a little bit of time, is one of the things that I don't like to do in any situation, and I know this is otherwise very tragic, is create a knee-jerk reaction, because typically that first reaction is not always the best thing that we should do, and we don't want to create a situation where maybe we think we're making progress and we're actually taking a step backwards. So we have been otherwise dealing as far as public works. We're still actually collecting data out there. We've been moving our data collector around, because I do also want to look at the entire corridor. For various things, I've made a few phone calls to some traffic engineers. I am not a traffic engineer. I should proceed with that, so I'm not the expert in this field, but I know people that are. So we're trying to otherwise get a few other ideas and stuff done as far as evaluation. What I can tell you based upon the data that we have so far today, as I think anyone else would know and is prevalent throughout the city, throughout the state, throughout the country, I mean, sure, people definitely are speeding. Like I said, we're still collecting data. It doesn't seem to matter. We've on kind of the ends. We're working towards the middle. That's everything south of the tracks at the moment. And, speed pretty close to the same. So whether you're by the houses or you're south there coming right along the river, the data is pretty subjective that speed is pretty consistent, throughout there. But like I said, we're still sorting all that out. And so what does that otherwise, tell us? Yeah, I think everyone, needs, which is typical for other places. We have a few outliers in there, but typically speaking, the speed we're at that 85th percentile, which is one of the metrics used as far as speed setting, is about 35 miles an hour. That means it captures about 85% of all the users are otherwise there. The one thing that is actually significant for is depending upon how finite we look at solutions to this and applying what the state otherwise identifies, the DOT identifies as far as speed setting, that southern half, once you get south of the houses there through along the river, in reality that's an outlying district by statute definition. It's within the corporate limits, but the spacing for houses and driveways is greater than 200 feet, would actually be 35 miles per hour. So one thing to keep in mind that if we're, there are ways to change the speed limit. I don't know what the origins of the 25-mile speed limit, but just for comparison, looking at the statutory speed limits, it says it would be 35. So if 85% captures that, people are actually driving what you would expect them to be driving on that roadway. There's not what I would consider truly an excess of speed based upon that factor alone, thinking it from that perspective. But I think everyone identifies that the speed limit is 25, given the fact that, again, still collecting data. It's not uncommon within the data we've collected that 95, 97% of the people are exceeding the 25. That could mean 26, but they're exceeding the speed limit. So just about everybody that's out there is exceeding the speed limit. So I want to look at things, as a corridor to see what we can otherwise get, as well as some finite things. One of the things that we always want to otherwise look at is potential, grant funding, because that's going to help us move things along faster. So trying to pinpoint some of the things that we can otherwise look and potentially do with that, because that's going to allow us to do bigger things faster than we probably will on our own. Some of the things that others talking about, and I know we talked about in internal meetings of that, Chief Cousteau, I think too, we mentioned that at some of our directors and chiefs meetings, some of the very low-hanging fruit that we want to implement there would be like the speed boards, because I think even the data that the PD had collected shortly thereafter, one of the columns that they always have that, and Chief Cousteau, correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I'm not familiar with your data, but there is a column within yours that identifies percentage of those that actually react to it slow down from their speed change. So it recognizes the speed change, which is pretty significant. It was in the 60% across the data that they otherwise had. So, and they are generally effective, and that's typically what even industry otherwise says. You're going to get, in that 40-ish range long term. People that have those feedback boards generally respond to them. They're relatively inexpensive. They're easy to put up, especially these days. With, we'll have to maybe deal with some of the tree issues, see if solar power would otherwise work. But if we can go solar powered, that would be pretty easy. Something that more often used in rural areas, but considering maybe an outlying district that probably others work, is to also paint the speed limit on the pavement, much like you'd see in the town of Hull. Again, just a reminder, to do that. What we're otherwise looking at, though, there seems to be, I have some concerns regarding how the guardrail plays out in it. And I'm looking for some assistance to see if we can't just work within the existing pavement to try to create a safer place if pedestrians are going to utilize the corridor as well, to create more urban shoulder there. If we can otherwise come up with that, and I'm working with others to see what we can come up with. For that, maybe we can restripe it, move the white lines, because one of the questions I have, I'm not the expert, distance from the guardrail, what's an appropriate distance otherwise to that. I'm sure there's guidance and stuff out there. But our measurements, there's typically about 4 feet off the guardrail to the fog line. That's the white line on the side that marks the shoulder. And we have about 3 feet on the other side to the edge of pavement. So it's fairly narrow, but it does would otherwise be defined as an urban shoulder. But maybe we can shy a little bit closer to the guardrail, give us a little bit more room there. If we're going to restripe it, one thing I'd want to do is put rumble strip in there. If everyone's familiar with shoulder rumble strip, you're tired of it, you get the audible and the physical reflex of that to know that if you're deviating out of your lane, to keep people that. Those are some things I think we can do, relatively low cost, to otherwise help control some of that. Beyond that, which would be really kind of whether that people that mostly live there and use that corridor would otherwise want. I mean, we can put in speed humps, we put temporary ones, we could, for a bit more, some design stuff, put in permanent ones made out of concrete or asphalt. Now, keeping in mind, there's about even just from the south side of where the houses are, there's just that one house in the middle. It's about 3,000 feet. The effective range of a speed hump is about 200 feet. So if you really want to try to control the speed, we'd have to either pinpoint specific areas we're trying to control speed at, say just around, the bend there, over the hill. Otherwise, it's an awful lot of speed limits, and I don't think anyone would want to put up with it to try to actually control speed from one end to the other. So those are some of the things, again, too, just trying to balance out what it is. But, that's something that I really like people's feedback on it, because that's something you have to live with every day and drive over, and, they can be annoying for people. They can move people around. They can actually increase speed in areas. So if we put, some down south, just like stop signs, if they're used inappropriately, can actually just move speeding problems along. And that's one thing we need to otherwise be cognizant of that. But those are some simple things that we can otherwise, do at the moment. What I, really otherwise, would be asking even this board and the council too is just for some support. I think, really to get some of the experts for some of the long-term things, looking at site distance, horizontal, vertical alignments of the roadway to see what others changes. Because, how it was built and how we design things today oftentimes are two different things. Things have otherwise improved about how we look about it, see if we can otherwise modernize and what that would take to do it. And there might be other relatively low-hanging fruit, that next tier of available things to help make improvements that we can otherwise do. One of the, of course, the concerns with working with that area is that not only is it wetland, it's also within the floodplain. So work we otherwise do has to be, coordinated with DNR as well as Army Corps of Engineers. See what it is, and those impacts have to otherwise be understood before we just kind of start filling things in. So like pushing the shoulder wider and putting in a sidewalk is probably not going to happen right away. There's going to be a significant amount of coordination to do that. So those are some of the other things, and then look for, some other opportunities. And quite honestly, there's no shortage of ideas that we can otherwise have. I mean, anything from cul-de-sacing the road just south of the last driveway. Does the road need to go through? I'm not saying for that, but I'm saying, you're thinking about ideas, what otherwise, makes it work. Many, many years ago, the Highway HH Bridge wasn't there. People didn't have it. People use that corridor differently than they do today. I'm just saying let's think outside the box to see what otherwise is the best solution for everybody. That would have to be something that I've talked to, chiefs about response time and all as well. That's not a unilateral decision, but thinking about what are some of the best things to do. Is it a boardwalk? A boardwalk, nearby, work better. If we're not filling in wetlands, that's usually a temporary disturbance as far as creating a boardwalk, much like you would see on the Green Circle Trail. They can be built a certain way that, they can otherwise be plowed and maintained in wintertime. That's much easier to permit. Now, the question is whether people would otherwise, utilize it, what the alignment would otherwise take. That's another potential, that we look at. Maybe it's easy enough if we can work within the urban shouldering, but maybe there's not as much coordination just to add to the road, widen it a little bit, and create a little bit more buffer space there. So those are some of the longer term things, as well as ultimately, looking at that corridor for, an eventual reconstruction. Of course, at that time, our goal is always to try to look at multimodal approach to things like that. And see what its needs are, do that, but looking for some of those things ahead of time. And of course, always just interested in what, the public's views of things are. I know part of it is even the aesthetics, so one thing I wouldn't want to come through there and just cut out all the trees. If we're looking for, certain things, like I said, the site distancing and stuff like that, would want to, make sure that it's truly necessary before we just react to do things. So that's really where we're at right now. I'm hoping to get the rest of our data collected over the next couple of weeks. And then, my hope, and we'll be looking for support there, is to reach out to some engineering firms, that specialize in this sort of thing, and just get a little bit of help from them and direction on some of those other things that I'm sure that I'm, like I said, just not as versed on to come up with, that we would need their help for, and come up with a longer term plan. But I think the speed boards, the message boards, and then looking at the roadway restriping with some rumble strip is probably a good start.
Thank you, Director. And I got to tell you, those silhouettes, they open a few eyes. They open mine. So there's not one single answer. And while the chief is coming up here to do his report, I want to just reiterate that we're talking about this tonight because we had some questions about it a couple weeks ago at our last meeting, and we weren't able to talk about it because it wasn't on the agenda. Again, there's no one simple solution for every single instance. Some people are very adamant that narrowing roads makes people drive slower and safer. In this case, the road is narrow, and that's part of the problem. So not every solution that works in Omaha or Indiana is going to work at every single road. Chief, you want to talk about some of the things that you've been doing prior to this incident and since?
Yeah, so Director Badun covered a lot of the stuff that's come up in all of our meetings about some of the safety issues. So we provided extra patrol. The issue with extra patrol is the times that people are speeding over in that area are the exact same times that they're speeding all throughout the city. Going to work, lunchtime, coming home from work, Buchholz Avenue during lunch period for the high school kids. And so we can't be there at all the times. We have 7 individuals that work the road at one time, and that's without anybody being off. So one of the things that we really want to try to do is purchase some more speed boards. You guys have probably all seen them, but we can put them in ghost mode, where they're collecting all the data we need, and people think they're off, but they're actually working. And then we'll actually activate them, and so they show the speed, and at 35 we can make them go blue and red, so it slows people down. Lieutenant Ben Eitenbrook with the department reached out to BOTS, the Bureau of Traffic Safety, through the Department of Transportation. And we're putting in for a grant. We got approval from the PFC last week, and he's going to be working with the traffic committee, safety committee. But we have 2 speed boards right now, and to purchase 2 more speed boards and a trailer, it's $32,000. So it's expensive, but they're well worth it. And they're out there all the time. We get citizens that call us up about certain areas. And so we literally put them out for about 2 weeks in each area, but they're consistently being put out there. And so that's one of the things that I think is really important right now. If we can get this grant out on West River, even though speed signs will slow people down, We'll keep providing extra patrol as well. But again, that's throughout the entire city. Other than that, I think Director Badoon reached on everything. Even putting the speed limit, painting it on the road there. So it's very obvious. They did that on Old 18, and it seemed to slow people down on Old 18 as well. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Chief. And as I said, there are several things we can do. We're trying to be a little diligent and I don't want to say thoughtful or hesitant, those are wrong words, but we want to make sure that whatever we're doing is going to have some impact. There was a talk about putting a centerline stripe. Well, we talked about that, and putting a centerline stripe on that road might actually have some bad side effects by forcing people to stay closer to their shoulder. Will it work? Maybe. Are there side effects? Definitely. So we're trying to make sure that whatever we're doing is going to have some effect and a significant effect without having the opposite effect in some cases. The rumble strips, like the director talked about, that's great. If people should always be paying attention, not eating your cheeseburger, not yakking on your phone or doing your makeup or whatever it happens to be. Pay attention when you're driving, but those rumble strips help people who may not be as diligent about paying attention, let them know when they deviate from the lane. So that might help a piece of it. Adding some additional shoulder width potentially can work. As the director said, there's some challenges there because there's a river on one side and wetlands on the other. Those are all going to be a little bit longer. So the chief, I know, has been doing a good job. I've got actual data on citations that he has given me prior to the incident and since the incident. Extra enforcement has been gone through. One thing I would ask is that there's not a public space for officers to park and monitor speed. So if anybody's interested in allowing an officer in your driveway to do that, show of hands isn't going to do me any good right now. Contact the police chief, give him your name and address. We'll want something in writing that we have your permission, and hopefully we can get some staff to do some additional enforcement out there as well. So if anyone has any other thoughts on that, by all means send them to the director's office. And we'll vet them through the experts and see what could be effective. There are some simple things that may not have a big impact, like painting the speed limit on the road. It may not have a big impact, but it's also a very low cost and easy to do. So it makes sense to do things like that. Did anybody have any comments that they wanted to bring forward? Absolutely, go ahead. Take a couple of minutes and
Okay, sure.
name and address for the record, please, except for Ms. Scott.
I didn't prepare anything. I'm just going to spitball here. My name is Gil Kovacic, 25-year West River Drive resident. I appreciated your low-hanging fruit speech. Yep, I think everything you said is great and doing it right and whatever, and those are all good points. I guess one of the things my main concern is kind of short-term solution, because if 80% is going 35, even 90%, hey, those are good numbers. We may have been late for church once that I went 34, I don't know, but I think the main issue I would like to see change, and sooner than later, is just more police presence for sure. There is 1 hour that any one of you smart people are welcome to sit in my yard with a lawn chair. We'll make lemonade. You will drop your jaw. You know what I meant? Sit there for a while and just wait and see somebody come flying through looking down at their phone. And I'm surprised it still goes on, that I'm like, oh wow, he's going to get it, because I've seen a little more police presence. I'm the only constituent you'll probably ever hear saying, I wouldn't mind if my taxes went up a little bit. Let's hire one officer to get on road duty or watch possibly the west side. So I think it's the Wild West, because just the other day we were in our living room and 3 cars went down by the river. 50 around my corner, Pleasant Street's a block long. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? And I thought, should I go all vigilante and call the police quick and get him down there? I walked out to the mailbox and waited for him to turn around and come back through, and I kind of walked out by the road and I said, hey guys, slow it down. And they were high school kids and said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And they drove away, lowered their heads. But I think the main thing I think should be focused on pretty quick would just be reckless driving. There's 1 or 2 an hour that I don't want to see it happen again. If it does, Stevens Point's going to be on GMA, if it happens in that neighborhood, and not for the wonderful beer and the water, but, Kill Street. So I don't think things have changed that much. We walk a lot, and As far as the river and the 4-foot space from the guardrail to the center line, in the summertime, the brush grows to that white line like weekly. I've called Public Works or Transportation, said, look into whose duty that is, if that could get chopped, or I'll go down there with a wagon sometimes. But that makes everybody go to the other side. So you get 2 dogs and a lady with a stroller and 3 bikes and 2 cars coming. And once an hour, one of those cars is head down texting, hammer time, that I'm like, please let there be an officer down by Turtle Pond. They can sit on Pleasant Street, they can sit on my grass, whatever they want. So if there's more staff to sit, I think that would really put the word out like, hey, watch yourself on West River Drive. So that's all I got for now. Stay safe, neighbors.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Scott, 3340 Whiting Avenue. So the East River or West River Drive kind of brought it to my attention that we really need to do something about speeding. About 1.5 to 2 years ago, the Sheriff's Department came out, and I don't know what these are called, but they monitored the speed. People couldn't tell that they were doing that, and they printed out a report for me, and they were going, this is Whiting Avenue between Riverview and Sherman Streets. They're using it as a racetrack. They're also using Riverview Avenue as a racetrack. They had speeds from 30 to 70 miles an hour. Now, I'm right off Whiting, and we don't have like a path where we can walk. There's no sidewalk, and it's extremely scary. Years ago on Brolowski and Hoover, before the Commons was there was a young girl killed in a car crash, and someone coming down Hoover, no, it wasn't Hoover, what is that road? No, it wasn't Brolowski, HH, where Crossroads is, there wasn't a light, there wasn't a stop sign, there wasn't anything. And this young girl, you couldn't tell how fast cars were coming, and there wasn't there. I went to the meetings and I said, you know, I got a report from DOT, and they gave me all the accidents that happened there. I said, I don't know what you should put there, a stop sign, you know, a light or whatever, but you need to do something in the interim, because I can tell you, look at the record, you're going to have more accidents, more things like that. No, we're going to look into it. A week later, huge semi-accident there. So I guess I don't know what the answer is, but one of the things I'm really concerned about is people are getting away with it. And I'm not saying 30 to 35. I'm saying in a 30, they're going 50 and 60 miles an hour. I don't want us to wait until somebody else gets hit or killed to say, well, we need to do something. And I know you are doing things. We don't have enough police officers or sheriffs to do this all over. One of the things I would like to see is anyone who gets and I don't know how many tickets are given out either, but if there's a ticket and you get a ticket for speeding and then you get another one, that should be doubled or tripled. I mean, people will be impacted if they're punished for something that's against the law because it'll save lives. But I'll tell you, that area all the way down, and I walk it all the time, it's really scary. And people they're not concerned. They're like, well, you know, I'm going to get away with it. Church Street, you know, all kinds of that. So I guess what I would like to see is something to warn the community, look, we're not going to, we don't have enough officers to get out there and check everybody speeding. And I'm not talking 30 to 33 or 35. We're all going to, you know, go over a little bit, and I get that. But when they are doing 30 to 50, that's really scary. We've got a lot of kids out there on bikes, and, you know, they're not going to be looking out for these speeders. So thanks for all you're doing. I appreciate it. And I'm all for big punishment. I really am. And not to hurt people, but to save people from doing that. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chris. Those are called speed boards, by the way? That's what the chief was talking about. That's a board that
Right.
you can either show your speed like they have on
Right.
Double H as you're coming by McDill.
See, we can't have a
Or turn
bumper
it
where
off.
we are because we have right across from me is a rehab center, and then down Sherman is the, what is it? River Pines, the
Oh,
old
sure,
River
yeah.
Pines. So ambulances and fire departments have to get through, so they can't slow them down. But there should be something we can put out there to slow them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? I think I saw another hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Jess Sherman, 2048 West Zinda Drive. There's a lot of talk about West River Drive. I'm hoping that in the monitoring of things that we're also monitoring West Zinda Drive and West Maple Ridge Drive. You know, we talked about how putting in speed humps on a really long stretch like West River may not be effective, but if you put in speed humps where the houses are on West Zinda and through West Maple Ridge, which are much shorter stretches of road, you would slow people down through those, and people go really fast down both of those roads, and would also deter people from using that as a shortcut. Because right now, people see the train and they think, oh, I'm going to zip through this residential neighborhood and go around. And part of the traffic on West River Drive are people who are trying to shortcut and are, as a result of that, just flying through our neighborhood. So I really think that the problem on West River, we also need to be looking at and thinking about these other connecting roads.
Thank you
all I
very
wanted
much.
to say.
Yeah, and I said it before, I'll say it again, we can't say it enough. Everybody everywhere needs to slow down and pay attention, and that's a good example. Just because there's a train there, people have a tendency, it's human nature. I'm going too slow this way, or this train, this way's blocked, or it's not moving fast enough for you. So you take the first side street, cut down a residential area, and now you're creating problems in areas that didn't have that kind of traffic. So I'm guilty of it too. I used to work at Skyward, and I'd get to about Patch Street, and if there was a train, I'd go all the way around and get to Hoover and hope there wasn't a train, and now there's a fancy overpass. Dave, you want to say something as well?
Thank you. I really appreciate the Director of Public Works, who's been really forthright and honest and helpful through this whole thing. He's a good man. I also appreciate the police department's efforts. They have really been helpful. I'm the closest one. My house is the closest one to the death. So I'm going to zero in on that, although I appreciate the other neighborhoods and the concerns that they have. Just because of time limits, I'm going to zero in on that. We've got 7 grandkids and we go for walks, and we just can't go in that area. And I'm going to say the same thing I did previously. We should have additional 2 feet of pavement added to the 2 feet of pavement that exists beyond the traffic boundary line, the fog line. There's essentially no flat walking zone beyond that traffic boundary line, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So everybody walks in the traffic lane. It's only needed in the south half-mile distance immediately adjacent to Double H, because that's where it drops off so dramatically that people, to use the term of the Director of Public Works, shy away from it. It's a shying zone. Just like when you walk down a sidewalk and there's an obstruction, you don't use the 2 feet of that 5-foot sidewalk. It's just a shying zone. That's just human nature. And thank you for pointing that out, because that's what we have there, that extreme drop-off. And then it's paved for the first 2 feet, and there's probably only 1.5 feet before it drops off. But that no one walks in that gravel area. That's kind of uneven, so it's not the safest thing. But then even in the 2-foot paved zone, that's part of that shying zone. So everybody walks out into the traffic area, and I've experienced that. I'm the one who lives the closest to this. And it should be, we don't have to worry about the east side of the road, because that's the road where the river is. So it's really, I'm referring to anything that I'm requesting the additional 2 feet. That's just beyond the west side. That's adjacent to the wetland, but we don't have to deal exceedingly with the Corps of Engineers, I think, because we're on the side that's not part of the river. And just one additional thing, we do have the countywide bicycle and pedestrian plan, and it does designate West River Drive as a significant pedestrian recreation trip street. And a lot of people use it particularly because it's broadcast at the Bach Run. And so when there's 5-year-olds out there, they see that's a kind of a fun spot to run, and they'll be back. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Dave. Anyone? Go ahead. Whoever wants to, Eric, go ahead.
Eric Olson, 2025 West River Drive. I'm the person who in 2021 requested that the city put up the speed boards. after observing the speeds that people are driving at, after being passed while going between 25 and 30 miles an hour, being passed by people behind me who are impatient to get where they're going. And at that time in 2021, I thought, well, we got to, I sensed that it was fast, but I'm like, we got to document this. And so the speed board study at that time did document that the speeds were exceeding the speed limit and that some people were driving as fast as, at that time, 67 miles an hour on that stretch of road. And I thought, well, what's going to happen now is there'll be some enforcement for a little while, and then people will forget about it until something happens. And so it did take until something happened and somebody was killed. And so now we're back at it. So the city has known about a speed issue since 2021. They've known it's a deadly speed issue since this spring. And now we're starting to talk about what can be done here. I do know that there are historic imagery showing that there was a center line striped on this road. I don't have access to the records. I'd have to spend time digging through what does the city of Stevens Point have for records as to when it was double striped, when they took the striping away, whether there was any effect of those changes. But I do know there's imagery showing the double stripe. And I do know that even after 2021, I would be passed by people who can't go slower than 30 miles an hour. They feel like they need to pass you. And when you're passing on that road, it's incredibly dangerous because there is one of the only hills on the west side, the one that the people turn around on the Bach Run. And so there's a limited sight line there. And there are people often walking along the side of the street. So one of the times when I was passed, the person basically almost hit two people coming on the side of the road walking where they're supposed to be walking. It's incredibly frustrating. And I do think that design does play an issue, does have a factor here. So if people feel comfortable driving 67 miles an hour, then they drive 67 miles an hour. If we can make them uncomfortable driving 67 miles an hour, then those dangerous speeds start to drop off. And there is a relationship between the speed at which someone gets hit by a vehicle and the mortality outcomes for them. So I don't want anybody to hit by a car at any speed, but when you get hit by a car that's going 50 miles an hour or over, your outcomes are much less positive. So let's work on using design features to control speed. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, before we get to the next speaker, I know you've got some data, or at least you had some data that you shared prior to the incident. I don't want to give anybody the impression that we haven't done anything since Mr. Olson asked for the speed boards. We do have citation data. Do you recall any of that off the top of your head? I don't off the top of my head. The number I remember was it was over 60 citations that have been issued in the past couple of years prior to the incident. So it's not like we just forgot about things and we did it for a little while and then it went away. That doesn't happen. As the chief says, we've got 300 lane miles of road in the city. We can't be everywhere all the time, and that's why we need people to obey the speed limits, obey the traffic rules, you know, we do what we can with the resources that we have. There was someone over here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Jackie Shimke, 440 West Trillium Court, Stevens Point. So I live in a court right off of West Zinda Drive. First of all, I have met with the two principals at PODS. They are well aware of the issues with the speeding that the high school students at that school cause and the reckless driving that goes on. They said they would be happy to back us in any attempts to possibly put like speed tables or speed humps along West Zinda Drive, which I think you almost have to do from the time Zinda comes off of Clark Street all the way until it meets West Maple Ridge. And then you'd also need them on West Maple Ridge because those two are, like we said, the feeder streets to West River Drive. I could tell you the times of day. I'm sure Jess and Jeff can too. And which cars or trucks are the ones that speed like clockwork, and it doesn't change. So we can always tell the police department where to park and you'll catch them. We can tell you what time, which cars, give you all that. So the other thing is I like all the ideas that have been presented. I think, you know, those are all great ideas. I think it would be long-term if we could do some kind of boardwalk off of, you know, the east side of West River Drive, kind of coming off of maybe the bike trail. It'd be a nice way for everybody to enjoy the scenery in there. I mean, that's why Herb would walk. He loved walking that road. There's a lot to see in there. It's beautiful. If we could somehow do that so people could actually enjoy it and not be afraid of getting hit by a car, I think long-term, that would be a great solution. So that's just what I had to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else here in person? Go ahead.
Sam Lang, Alder for District 9 and resident at 1547 Strongs. Just say thanks to the city staff. You guys have done an excellent job responding to the neighborhood over there, and got to say it's quite an honor to represent a neighborhood that's so involved and so caring for their neighbors. One of the things that I heard from you that I'd like as a point to take away is you're asking for us to do some studies, give you some information to make some decisions on, and that's one of the things that I'd hope that can come out of this discussion and why this was brought forward, is that we have some actionable information brought before us. And so I'd look forward to seeing what those studies might be so that we can make decisions that will be impactful and they'd be informed decisions. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in person? The one I particularly liked was an escalator for multiple offenses. I know the city attorney's listening, and I don't need an answer right now, but I want to look into that and see if that's something we can even legally do. That was a good idea. Looks like we're exhausted here, Mr. Rourke, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, there's been Trevor Rourke, 601 Washington. I'm a north side neighbor, not on the west side of the river, but I've talked with Jackie and some others about this issue. And I mean, through my kind of history in being an advocate for safer streets, this issue just keeps coming up. It's very historic here and pretty much anywhere USA. It's not unique to us. And it is definitely a design problem. We in the United States have focused too much on, without using too much jargon, level of service, which is basically defined as pushing as many cars through as fast as possible through a corridor, for a lack of better terms. But if you focus on that first, and then other things come after that, you're going to get speeding. Just like we talked about, other people mentioned there's human behavior of being late for something or being anxious for something or, hitting the train at the wrong time, whatever it is. It's going to happen. So why would we design our streets to empower people to have that opportunity to speed? And what has been very important to me and in pointing out is that enforcement cannot do it. I know we've basically relied on enforcement for decades, and we can't have enough staff, we can't have enough officers on the streets to enforce, and it's very evident. When I come home or I'm out pedaling or walking or driving, whatever it might be, I see speeding all the time, every single day, every day. And why is that happening? Because the design encourages it. So, long story short, I think there have been some good design ideas brought up tonight. One I'd like to put on the table as well is something called flexi posts. You could delineate space for pedestrians and bikes with paint, but that only delineates, it doesn't actually protect. So flexi posts are basically plastic posts that can flop down if you accidentally hit one, but you're going to notice it immediately, kind of like a rumble strip. However, there's that actual visibility of a post standing there, sort of protecting a pedestrian or a bicyclist between the travel lane and somebody walking or biking. And the cool thing about those is they can be pulled out in the winter for plowing, because a lot less people bike or walk. And EMS can run them over if there's some reason they have to access something on the side of the road. So I just want to throw that idea on the table. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Probably be even more effective if every third one was made out of rebar. The city attorney came, and Logan, go ahead.
So there are no escalators for first, second, third offense in the statutes. We could not create something like that. However, let me just kind of describe some scenarios here. So picture a 30-year-old person gets pulled over for doing 39 in a 25. They've got no other traffic tickets on their record. There's a chance that an officer is just going to give them a warning. Now, a warning isn't just, okay, you better shape up. It's an actual document that's created. It goes into the system, and you have it on your traffic record. That person gets pulled over again, there's a greatly decreased chance they're going to get another warning. However, suppose, again, it's 39 and 25. That's 14 over the limit. The categories are 1 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 19, 20 to 24, so on and so forth. An officer is likely, instead of writing that for the 11 to 15 category, to write it as 1 to 10. Cut you a little bit of a break. Now, the difference between those categories isn't necessarily night and day, but it might be 1 point difference, or it might be a few dollars or something like that. When you get up into the higher ones, over 20, then you're talking a 6-point violation. Now, that's the other thing, is you've got the point system, and that's really where the rubber meets the road, to borrow an apt metaphor, for repeat traffic offenders. Somebody can get in what's called HTO, habitual traffic offender status, where then they have, escalators, graduated driver's license. And you have young drivers, they get their first ticket and it's treated like anyone else. If they get subsequent tickets, the points on those are doubled. So essentially, if they get 2 tickets, there's a chance that they might lose their license. You could also have things along the lines of, okay, I'm going to write you the speeding ticket, but I'm going to give you a warning for your expired registration, or this or that or the other thing. As people have more and more problems with this stuff, they get more and more of the citations written for the full value of the speed that was detected. So there's sort of an inherent escalator in there without you even having a first, second, third offense type thing.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Last call for comments. As I said, there's no single solution that's going to work, but what we're going to try and do is find the most effective things and try them to see what can and can't be done, what does and does not help. I do believe that enforcement is one of the biggest tools that we have, but enforcement requires resources, and again, we can't be everywhere all the time. I know that probably most everyone in this audience can pick a town and they say, you don't speed through there because they're going to pinch you every single time. That's a reputation I wouldn't mind having here in Stevens Point. So we'll continue to work on this, and thank you all very much for coming out. Thank you, directors, city attorney, police chief, for providing us with some of the things that we have been doing and some of the things that we hope to do in the near future. Item number 3 is a resolution, maybe appropriately, request from the city of Stevens Point for a commitment to eliminate roadway fatalities as part of the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant that we're awarded. Director?
Yes, just as it's even in the agenda, and this is something that's actually asked of us as far as our grant that we've been awarded, is to put this, to be a part of this resolution. It's really a commitment to reducing fatalities. The road, that's the whole crux of it. That's what the grant dollars are intended for. So looking for that. There are a couple of pages, if you're not familiar with it, because I'm sure that not everyone may be, just a couple of pages of what that action plan components are. So really what that grant is going to allow us to do for that. But the first 2 pages there, the first page really itself is the resolution itself.
Right. And again, this is a countywide, this isn't just a city. We're getting all the municipalities to sign onto this. So with that, I'd be looking for a motion. Moved by Keemer.
Second.
Second by Morrow. Sorry, my head was turned, I didn't hear. Any discussion there? Comments from the audience? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say briefly, kind of to build off this West River Drive discussion, I think this fatality has really tragically highlighted a problem that certainly is very extreme and prominent right now in West River Drive, but we've got residents on Gala and Berlovsky saying how terrible speeding is. We've got residents on Green Avenue Green Avenue saying how bad speeding is. I was almost late here because I ran into a resident on Clark Street, and when the weather gets nice like this between Michigan, well, Division and Michigan, people just race through at 60 miles an hour. So Main Street as well, which is also in my district. So not to downplay the significance and severity of West River Drive, but I do think this is prevalent all over town. And so I'm hopeful that maybe some of the research that's done either for West River Drive or through the Safe Streets those are tools that maybe we can implement in multiple locations, even though each, street is unique or environment is unique. There are tools that we can use in more than one place. So.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Comments from the audience? Seems like kind of a no-brainer, but it's a requirement. I think we are committed to doing that. I think every municipality involved in this is committed to doing this. This is just kind of putting it into words once again. The motion is to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 4 is revision and renewal with the McDill Inland Lake Protection and Rehabilitation District regarding weed harvesting operations and equipment. A little bit of history. The McDill area has a lake district. Lake districts are their own taxing entity. That means all of the property owners within that district pay an extra amount every year. And that goes for maintaining things within the Lake District. One of the major things they do, you saw the dredging projects, that doesn't happen every year, but weed harvesting does. Eurasian water milfoil is pretty prevalent there, and they have a harvester that has been working with a partnership between the city and the Lake District to get those weeds harvested, hauled off, and disposed of. That contract or agreement had expired, and we've been working very diligently with the Lake District, city staff. The harvester had an accident where it was overturned. I guess it's 2 years ago now. We had to get a replacement harvester. We've been working very diligently on this agreement. Unfortunately, Keely isn't here to see it into fruition, but that was one of her big motivators as the alderperson for part of that district. The city attorney has approached the lectern, so I'm going to let him speak to it, and then we'll have the director, Badoun, speak if necessary.
So we had an agreement that on its face had expired a while back, but it goes all the way back to the 90s from when this first started. And the basic nature of the partnership is the city owns this equipment. The city transports it to the pond at the beginning of the harvesting season, transports it away at the end of the season, and then the Lake Association provides staffing and actually conducts the operations. The old agreement was old. It was written in, I think, 1994, so it took some updating, so I kind of scrapped it and started somewhat fresh. We had been having discussions on this for almost 6 months now, and have gone through a number of versions. The insurance requirements in there, that's the topic we've been discussing most recently. I say we, it's Krista Lake Association. Just today, I had reviewed insurance document from their agent, which does appear to satisfy all of my concerns. So intent would be to just take that insurance certificate and attach it to this as an exhibit and insert some language that accounts for that in the appropriate way. Obviously, that exact insurance certificate won't always be the one that is applicable, but I'll reference it in a way that is coherent and sets it as kind of an example of something that would be acceptable. So I know there was a question I'd seen about the termination on this. It's open-ended in terms of how long it could last. The manufacturer says the life of one of these machines is X number of years. But picture if you bought a pontoon boat and they told you as you were purchasing, well, this has a lifespan of 20 years. You'd be like, excuse me, what? Huh? What if I maintain it and replace parts and keep it going? That's kind of what happened with the old one. And but for this overturning incident, it probably would have continued for some time too. So there is the ability for either the parties to terminate it during the off season, and there's just a 30-day notice. It's written in there. So it is relatively straightforward, despite the long conversations that there's been about it. You'll notice the one kind of conspicuous thing in there is the maintenance costs. That previously had been $500. So essentially it was the Lake Association would pay for any repairs that cost $500 or less. The city would step in and pay for repairs that cost more than that. Now, if you just take that number and punch it into an inflation calculator, and for 1994, you get a number now a little over $1,000, which considering the cost of parts and maintenance on something like this is a pretty low threshold in my opinion. But ultimately I left that as just a variable since it's kind of the policy-based biggest consideration here. I didn't want to just stick a number in there that I thought was great and then have you sort of led around by me, because I'm not supposed to be the one making the policy decision. So we'd leave it up to you, and obviously Scott can chime in with regards to any questions you have about a reasonable number there. But would ask you to put a number in there before you take any action on this.
Thank you, Attorney Beveridge. And I did talk with the director in regards to this. He evaluated the costs associated with it and what historically there has been. And you assured me that you'd have a number by 6 o'clock. It's after 6 o'clock, so you got a little leeway.
Right.
But based on your calculations and historical data, sir, what recommendations do you have?
So much along the lines of what the attorney was just saying, as far as just the cost of others' equipment, the $500, say in its day, seems to be pretty reasonable. So keeping in line with that, we felt, talking to superintendent as well, in that range. So that $1,000 to $1,500 range, we figured would probably be appropriate, and basically in line with what the original one was. At the $500 is probably appropriate with what repairs are these days. If we wanted to keep it consistent with kind of what our those actual costs are, and keep in line with what the original agreement with the Lake District was.
So the recommendation then by staff, 1,000, 1,500, which would you prefer? How about if we do it?
Things don't get any cheaper, so I mean, if we're comfortable with 1,500, I'd say 1,500. It's just, especially on these, this is more specialized equipment. Some things are readily available, some things, we have to get from the manufacturer.
Right, and that will go in because the contract will continue for a long time. Last one was, what'd you say, 94? Something like that. So that hedges the potential exposure to the city as well as to the Lake District. So in section 6B Bravo, where the numbers just have X's in there, we would insert $1,500 in both of those locations. And with that, I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion to move with the $1,500.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the
Correct.
agreement with $1,500 as the amount.
Yes, this is a community resource. This isn't just a lake district. It's not a lake for just them. It's the lake for everybody. I know that the city also helped when the dam broke. So we do have a history of doing this. And as I said, this is a resource for everybody. And I think it's money well worth spent.
Great, thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Boozy, thank you.
Yep.
Discussion?
I missed that. Is there an inflation thing that goes with it?
There
every
is
year?
not in this case.
Because I have an inflation calculator in 1994, $500 is now $1,994.
Is it? Well,
just for everybody's knowledge, I'm just saying what it is, so.
okay. And at this point, I mean, we're open to suggestions, but I think this is reasonable. We can always revisit it, if it
On a
turns out
yearly
that
basis, or what?
1,500.
Because if inflation goes up 6% one year, what happens?
We can revisit it anytime we choose.
Oh, okay.
That doesn't mean the Lake District has to agree to it.
Okay.
But as the city attorney said, there is some verbiage in here to review it periodically.
Is this piece of equipment only used by that Lake District, or is it
Yes.
used? Okay. So it's
Only used on McDill Pond.
Okay.
Yes.
So in regards to repairs, would, like, say there's some sort of accident, something needs to be checked out, would that go back to Public Works for repair to the extent that they're able, and then would they bill the district, or would there be an outside mechanic? Or?
So depending on the situation, right, it's insured, which is what we used when the machine flipped over. So I would think based on whatever it happens to be, let's say it needs a new motor, It just got old and wore out. A new motor wouldn't be covered under insurance necessarily unless there was an accident involved. If it just died, we would be responsible for it under this contract. If it was, I don't know, fuel filters I know comes up periodically because on the old one, they had to replace the fuel filter frequently because the fuel tank was rusting and particles were getting in, plugging the filter frequently. Those are under $1,500, or in the previous one, under $500, so the Lake District handled all of that replacement. But it would have to be a case-by-case basis, determining what was the damage and if, we needed to partner with the Lake District on it. The contract spells it out. Anything over $1,500, if approved, would be our responsibility.
How is the 1,500? Is that on a single incident or is it a per season cap? I'm not seeing anything.
Oh, I'm going to defer to the city attorney, but it looks like it's a routine maintenance, single incidents is what I see.
Okay.
So if a blade goes out tomorrow and a timing chain goes out next Tuesday, those would be two separate incidents.
I think that covers, then the 1,500 I feel like would cover fairly well. I mean, always a possibility of massive things that are way over that, but it's not capping it per season, which is good.
Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Morrow?
I believe this is also a brand-new machine, because
one of them. We still have the old one, right?
There are two of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So not the one that was total loss with the capsizing, but there was always a backup. So if one breaks down, the weed harvesting operations continue with the backup. So we have one new one now, and one that is, I don't even know what year it is. Do you know off the top of your head? It's newer than 92.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
It says that we can terminate, either party can terminate in the off-season with 30 days' notice. It also says it applies until something like that happens. Do we want to put something in there to revisit the dollar amount in 2 years or 3 years, or just want to terminate it if the cost to repair and parts go up so much that $1,500 is not enough?
So I don't
know what would be the best way to kind of protect both parties.
Yeah, I would suggest that we don't put a clause with an escalator. That termination clause, while it says terminate, really just means renegotiate.
So that's
so if there were a time, if there were a time where it's like, geez, parts have gone up higher than the inflation calculator, and we're really, looking to, I don't know, 2,500 or whatever it happens to be. I want to remind you that the Lake District is also a taxing entity for the sole purpose statutorily of maintaining the lake. So while it is a community resource, those who live on the lake generally have more use out of it, which is why the statutes allow for the creation of a lake district to cover those costs. Any other thoughts? Comments from the audience? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agreement with the item 6B, inserting $1,500 into both of those variable spots. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. It will still go to the Lake District for approval. And with that, our agenda is exhausted, and we are adjourned at 7:11.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.